What's happening, everybody? This is the long overdue and much anticipated video on all things Streamdeck and how it relates to controlling Shure gear and any other IP-based stuff you might have in your rig, in your neck of the woods. So let's dive right in. But before that, this is just going to be a down and dirty tutorial. So I just want to get you up and running to get some cool stuff happening on your Streamdeck. So let's dive right in. So hopefully you have the hardware. If you don't, you can kind of play along with the software, but it's probably best you have it. So go get it. Trust me, you're going to love it. And let's begin. So the first thing you're going to need is 2 bits of software. One's the Streamdeck hardware, or a Streamdeck software, which is native to the hardware. And then you're going to need the companion software, which sits on top of the Streamdeck software. So those 2 bits of software. Now, those things, the links to that can be found on my Teams channel, my design channel. So in there, there is a all things Streamdeck sub channel. And in there, under the files tab, there's a document in there, download links. So on that doc, there are download links for the 2 bits of software that you're going to need. So go there, do that. Now, if you're not part of my Teams channel, hit me up and I'll get you connected. So go ahead, click that link, or click the links and get those bits of software installed, and then we'll pick up from there. So I'm going to pause, let you do it, and come back. We'll have a party. All right, so hopefully you got those softwares installed and you're ready to go. So let's pick up from there. But again, from the outset, one thing that should hopefully be obvious is that your hardware, the Streamdeck hardware, needs to be plugged into your computer that has the software, the USB connection, and then the computer needs to be connected to the network, or a network that all of your Shure gear is on, or whatever you're looking to control, because that's how the whole thing works. There is a way to kind of remote the Streamdeck to a different machine. I haven't done that, but maybe do a future video on that. But just know that there is the kind of physical connection that needs to be in place for this all to work. Again, hopefully obvious, but just wanted to make sure that was mentioned ahead of time. So, all right, so now let's talk about the software. So there's a couple things we need to do to get both bits of software kind of at a base level so we can start doing things. So let's get this up, and I will launch the Streamdeck software first. And this will populate now with the kind of virtualized interface of the hardware. So you can see all the 15 buttons. Again, I have a 15 button version of this hardware. There is a 3 button or 6 button, 6 and 30 button variants of these. And that may relate to how this presents itself. But again, for my situation, I've got the 15, so it's going to show all the 15 buttons here with a pre-populated little welcome button that if you press it goes off to the Elgato website. So on the right-hand side, you see a list here of the plugins, the integrations they have with different platforms. And basically the Streamdeck was made for streamers and gamers. And so a lot of these integrations aren't really helpful to the workflow we have, which is why the folks that created the companion software did that, because that's the way we hook into all the AV gear and use this hardware to control stuff outside of the gaming and the streaming world. So just know that a lot of these plugins aren't going to be helpful to us. So first things first, what we're going to need to do here is click on this icon here, the Streamdeck Store, and then we're going to click on plugins because we need to install the companion plugin for it to talk to each other. So we just type in companion. There it is. We're going to install this, and it's just going to ask, are you sure? Yes. And then once that's done, it's going to install a profile. That's a little bit out of scope of this tutorial, but we can go ahead and close that out. And you can see here that we have a bunch of buttons with broken links. So this is a bit of first troubleshooting. This basically means that the companion software isn't running. So if you're in your setup and you notice this, it's simply because the companion app isn't running. The way out of that usually is to set the companion app in your startup folder so that the companion app starts when you start your computer. Again, I'm not going to I'm not going to tell you how to do that. That's a simple thing. Google it if you don't know how to set startup apps. So again, on the right-hand pane, most of these plugins are unhelpful. So what I do is click the table of contents button up here, and then I just reorder this, bring this up to the top, because this companion button is basically what we use all the time. So sometimes it gets a little finicky. Come on, work with me. Oh, I'm grabbing the wrong thing. Grab that. Okay. All right, now I got it up the top. Click done. We can also maybe put the Streamdeck here and the system one below that. And that should be fine. So again, this custom companion button thing is going to be what we're going to be using about 80% of the time, maybe even 99% of the time. So, all right, that's pretty much all we need to do on the Streamdeck software side of things to get it prepped. So let's go ahead and launch the companion app. And that's going to run as a system background app. You can see it's here now in my tray. And if I right click, it'll give us some options to quit out of there. So as you can see, now we've got the companion is now sitting overlaid on top of the Streamdeck. But if we go here back to the system tray and hit launch GUI, that is going to bring up our software interface. It's a web-based interface to do all the stuff. So this is really where all the magic happens within the companion app. So again, there's some stuff we're going to need to do to configure this to work the way we want it. So first we're going to go here to the settings tab, and we're going to deselect this option, show the toolbar on each button, show the top bar on each button, just deselect that. I'll show you that as we get into button creation, why that's the case. And then we're also going to make sure this already was enabled, but it probably isn't by default. Use Elgato plugin for Streamdeck access. This is important because otherwise the companion app will basically override the Streamdeck software, and we don't want that because we want to be able to use Streamdeck buttons and companion buttons. That doesn't make necessarily sense right now, but trust me, this is the way we want it. So make sure that this option is selected. And then as it says here, requires companion restart. So go back to your system tray, right click on the companion, quit out of there. Hit, yeah, I want to quit. That's going to say, hey, Houston, we have a problem. So basically, well, I'll just go back to the desktop here and relaunch here. And then it should automatically bring up the little pop-up. If not, again, system tray, launch GUI. It might be, I might have it set hidden. Anyway, one thing to note, if I double click or just click on the icon, usually this pop-up comes up when you launch it. You want to make sure that your network interface is set to the local host, which is 127.0.0.1, or in my case, I just have it, well, I don't have it set to all interfaces, but this is the local host. That's typically the connection that you want. By default, it should just work. If it doesn't work, if you're running into problems just even getting it connected, hit me up. I might be able to walk you through why that's the case, but just know that that might be something you need to look at. Anyway, so we're back at the interface. So this, again, is kind of where we do all the bread and butter of making stuff happen. So we've got the thing configured, so let's kind of dive in. But I will say, just a note, I'm working on version 2.2.3 at the time of this recording. Your software version, when you watch this, might be a future version and may look a tiny bit different or vastly different. Who knows? But hopefully not too different, and you can kind of track along with that. So just a heads up, if yours looks different, it's probably just a different version. So first thing we want to do is make a connection to a piece of gear. So that is a connection. And so again, simply just on a piece of equipment. In our case, let's do Shure gear. We want to connect to a device. So we add a new connection. So we can do that by, well, we have a whole list of stuff here that they've written modules for, including Shure gear. If we scroll down, we can see a bunch of Shure modules that the folks have written. In general, most of these are unhelpful. They're not actually fully populated with all of the commands that all of our devices have, and as such, they're quite limited to kind of controlling the kinds of stuff that we're looking to do. The one exception is the Axient Digital module. That's actually pretty well made, and probably because this stuff is really more suited to live production than it is to integrated systems. So as such, again, these modules leave a lot to be desired. So unfortunately, we can't avail ourselves to these modules. And the main thing that we lose out on is feedback. And I'll get to that when we create buttons, but just know that we aren't going to actually use these Shure modules. So what do? Let's scroll all the way back up to the top, and then we're going to search by typing in TCP. This is the connection type that we are going to do for pretty much everything we're looking to do. You may have, again, other gear that you're looking to connect to. Check to see if there's a module. Again, that's kind of the outside the scope of this particular video. I may go into some other videos with gear that I happen to have that does have module integration. But again, we're going to do TCP connection. So this first one, generic TCP and UDP request, is going to be the thing we're going to be doing. So do this, we're going to add. So now, basically, we have to configure this connection to the piece of gear that we have. So we want to label this with a friendly name so that we, when searching later, can quickly get to this. So we're going to call this, in my case, I'm going to start with an MXA910 that I have here in my rig. And then the only other bits we need to hit target IP. Target IP is the control IP. So in my case, 192.168.1.27. And then the target port is our control port, which, as you should know, is 2202. Leave that TCP connection, and then we're going to hit save. All right, now we see that we have status OK. That means we're actually talking to a device. In this particular case, it's an MXA910. And so this is a good bit of feedback. We know if we're actually talking to it. Now, it could be the case we accidentally hit the control IP of a different device, and it's still going to connect. But again, this is kind of a first row of defense of troubleshooting. So here we can disable that. So as we start to add more connections, more devices, it may be the case you have stuff coming in and out, and you want to disable it if that piece of gear is not connected. Otherwise, it'll sit in error, and your error log will start to pile up. So super helpful to have this enable, disable. Also, we can edit that connection simply by just getting back into that config. If we happen to change the IP, or we fat fingered and we have a status that's not connected, we can hit the right IP and fix that there, or relabel it if we need to. So that's what the edit is there for. So hit save. Again, we have a piece of gear. So let's just do one more piece of gear again to show you that process. TCP, generic TCP and UDP request. In this case, let's make this my P300, and I'm going to make that the target IP is 192.168.1.61. Again, target port 2202. Hit save, and there we go. We're connected to our P300. Now you can continue this list, populate all your gear in. That's usually a best if you've got your list of stuff all ready to go. Just kind of go in there, truck along, and enter all your gear with the IP and control port. So now let's get into making an actual control button. This is the fun stuff. Okay, so now we're going to click over to button, and here we see the layout is showing us this template. Now notice that there isn't parity between my 15 button hardware and this showing 32 buttons. So this, it's okay, because basically what we're going to do is we're going to map the companion buttons over to the Streamdeck buttons so that they can talk to each other. That may not make sense right now, but for now, just know that it's okay that these are different. Also, we have 99 pages that we can put all sorts of buttons on. So the sky's the limit as to all the stuff you have. So it's good from the outset here to keep housekeeping, maybe to make a page per device, or depending on what you're doing, you might need multiple pages. So keep that in mind as you create pages. If you need a lot, to kind of provision extra things so that you're not like all out of sorts. But again, that's up to you to kind of manage your own workflow. So for this, again, we're going to start with a 910 to kind of get us up and going. So I've made this page, I called it the MXA 910 page. By default, it's going to add a button that just has a label of the page, of what the page is, and then a page up, page down. This isn't going to be helpful for us, and is why we did that settings earlier on when we set up the software. Again, I'll kind of get into that when we start mapping buttons over from here to the Streamdeck. All right, so basically what we want to do is simply just click on any one of these buttons. Again, your own management, but let's just start on this first upper left button, and we're going to start making stuff happen. So then once that's done, we head over to the right side, and we're going to select this button, create a regular button. There's other options here, but trust me, this is pretty much the only one we're going to use. So we're going to create a regular button. All right, now we're on our way. So here we have all kind of like all the formatting options we have to make this button look the way we want it to look. And we have a little preview here. We can put a button text. So in this case, we're going to send a reboot command to the MXA 910. So let's call that reboot. Now, obviously that doesn't look formatted correctly. So let's change the font size to 18. Now it looks okay. And then we can change the font color from white to whatever we want. We can also change the background color, change the text alignment, and then we can browse here to put an image as our button background. We will get into that later under when we start to getting into the real fun stuff. So, but just know that you can put an image in there and then change that image alignment here. And then here is where that option earlier when I said we'll get into. So by default, these things have this little header at the top of the button where it shows the page and button number, which corresponds to this button. This will become very handy later. So make note of this now, what button number this is mapped to. So it just eats up too much real estate, and it cleans things up to have that disappear. So that's why we had that option set earlier in the settings. So I'll put this back to follow default. So then now we have that full button real estate to do what we want with the button. Okay, so now we have this set as a reboot command, and we have it roughly formatted the way we want. And now let's get into how we actually map a control to this button. Basically, this is only going to be a press action. So we can do separate press and release. That use case, well, I don't use it. I'm sure you could probably think of some logic why you would want that. We will get into toggle, which is different than this. But for now, all we're going to do concern ourselves with is a press command to send off this reboot command to the MXA 910. So what we do, we click on this field, and now we have to tell it what device we're going to connect this command to. So we have to type in that we want to control our MXA 910. And that's why we labeled it MXA 910. So we can start typing in, and then it'll start populating with things that are MXA, and in this case, we only have the 910. So we'll select this MXA 910 send command. Now, basically all we're going to do is put our control string in here of the reboot command, and that is referenced off of our command strings. If you aren't familiar with our command strings or can't memorize them, I certainly haven't, simply just go to our website or do a Google search for command strings MXA 910, command strings P300, whatever device you're looking, pull up that document, and then you're going to find the command you want, either copy and paste it, or simply just type it in. In this case, I happen to know that the reboot is set reboot. And then this command end character, we're going to set to none. That's what I've found to work and not confuse things. So we will have to do that on every command. Basically, we're done. We've created a button that will send the set reboot command to the MXA910. I can test this by hitting this test action, and this is a good practice. So when you create buttons, especially if you have a whole host of steps in your command or in your button press action, or when we create latches, you're going to want to test this to make sure it's doing what you think, so that you don't get too far down the road and end up having to kind of restart. So we can test this. I'm actually going to hit it. And you can't see it, I don't have a camera, but it is actually rebooting my MXA910. So we have accomplished what we want. So there we go. We have a simple command sent off to a Shure device in Companion. Now, the next step is to map this button over to an actual button on the Streamdeck itself. So let's head over to the Streamdeck. Okay, so basically now what we're looking at is when we installed that plugin, it asked if we wanted to create a new profile, and that's what it's done. So now it's created a profile on the Streamdeck that is strictly just the companion buttons. We don't want that. We want a mix match, again, for reasons we'll see later. So that being the case, we want to go back to the original profile that was kind of by default. So here we just click on this drop down and we go to default profile. You can see I have a whole bunch. This is just from my rig here. So you'll probably only have the default profile copy and default profile. So let's go back to default profile. And now this is kind of the fresh start from where we want to be. So first things first, let's just delete this out of here. This is unhelpful. So let's just right click on this button, delete, and it's going to say this. We can click don't ask me again. All right, so now we're really at a fresh state. So what do we want to do to get that button over? So basically, again, this is where that plugin is. We want to just drag this companion button over to where we want this button, any one of these. So let's map it down lower right-hand side. All right, so now, again, we're mapping the companion button to the Streamdeck hardware button. So we click on it, make sure that we're selected on the right button. And here we just here's where we map it. So it's the button number followed by the page number that it's on. So in this case, we go back. Again, we're going to look at this little tab here is kind of what's going to be most helpful in referencing it. So it's page 1, button number 2, so 1.2. So if we go back to the Streamdeck software, we're going to say page, in this case, button first, button number 2, and then it's already populated here when it says dynamic, but we don't want dynamic because basically this, depending on what page you are on the companion software, if I scroll over to page 2 and go over back, it will make this button disappear. So we want to make sure we hard code this to page 1. So again, we're page 1, button 2 is now mapped. And so now if I push this button on the 910, it's going to send that command off. And we've done it. We've created a button on the Streamdeck to send the reboot command to the MXA910. So pretty much that's it. That is the workflow. Now it's just a matter of getting a little bit more granular, a little bit more complicated into the button creation, making different button types and creating different logic to do the different things that we want to do. So let's stop here. Now that we've gotten this down, maybe create a button yourself with the reboot and maybe see if you can do something different and fire off a command on a different device. But when we come back, I'm going to talk about toggle, and we'll make a toggle button to do a channel mute for the MXA910. So see you soon. All right, so we've created a button that does a single command off to a Shure device, and it actually does it. So hopefully you've played around. Maybe you've gotten to do the same thing, or you've figured out how to do something else. Maybe you've bricked the device, but either way, we've done something neat. So let's kind of continue on and talk about toggle buttons. Toggle buttons are super helpful and pretty much the bread and butter of my designs, because that's often what we're doing. We're turning channels on and off. We're turning a particular DSP on and off, maybe AEC on and off, AI denoiser, yada, yada, yada. So let's create a toggle button. So let's get back to our software. And here we are back to our palette. And let's create a new button. Now, let's introduce a new concept here. We have copy, move, and delete buttons. That's super helpful in when we create more complex buttons. For instance, here we're going to create a toggle on and off of the, let's say it's a channel mute. Well, if you want to create channel 1 mute, and then a next button is going to be channel 2 mute and on and off, basically you can just copy that button, and then all you need to do is change the channel number instead of entering all these separate commands over and over and over again. You can just create copies of buttons that are similar and then just change the variables. Hopefully that makes sense. But the one wonky thing with this, it's totally counterintuitive. First, you need to choose the action that you're going to do. So in this case, we're going to make a copy of this reboot button, and then put it right next to it. So again, counterintuitive. What you do first is you say, what action do you want to do? So copy, and then it kind of walks you through. Press the button you want to copy. I want to copy this button, and then where do you want it? I want it right here. Okay. Super easy, but I will tell you, you will screw this up so many times and it will be so frustrating. You will copy the wrong button and you will paste it over on top of the button you don't want to, or you will erase the wrong button and have to start all over. So just know it's going to happen, deal with it, but it's counterintuitive and it is what it is. So anyway, we've created a copy of this button, the reboot. Now let's talk about how to make a toggle button. All right, first thing, let's rename this. We will call this mute. And what we are going to do is we are going to mute and unmute the MXA 910. So that's going to be kind of the global mute. So we've got it named mute. And now let's go again over to our command string document found online with our MXA 910. I've scrolled down to the corresponding thing. So this is the command that we're going to want to mute the device. So I'm going to copy that, go back over to my companion web interface, and then just overwrite this command by pasting that command. So here we go. Set device underscore audio underscore mute on is going to mute that MXA 910. So that is what happens when we press the button. Now, to make it a toggle, we need to make sure that we click this box so that pressing the button does one thing, and then when you press it again, it does the other, and then when you hit it, it does the first thing, second thing, first things, over and over again, toggle. Hopefully you get that concept. So we have our latch command, that's our press, and then when we press again is our unlatch action. So what we need to do here, since we copied this already had that MXA 910. So again, we need to either type in, if you have a long list of devices, in this case we have recently used here, we will simply just click on the MXA 910 send command, because again, we need to tell it what to control, because we can control multiple things with one button press. So in this specific case, we just want the MXA 910 send command again. So instead of going back over, copying, paste the mute off, I will just simply paste that same command in, and then I know it's just simply changing this to off. And again, change that to none. And now we essentially have our mute button. So if I go to the MXA 910 and we log into it, I will just show you that we have accomplished what we want. So our device is muted now. So I will take this chance to tell you, I think I mentioned this with the Shure modules that are written. So the one big downfall of the TCP controls is that there is no feedback. So when you press a button on the Stream Deck, it will show in the web interface or on Designer the button press that you have done. But if you make a button press within the web interface or within Designer, it will not track with the button press that you have on the Stream Deck, especially when we get into the faux feedback with this button that we will do. So just know that there is no feedback with that. So that being said, I will show you because on our 910, our device is muted. So when I hit test action, it's going to mute the device. It's muted, okay? If I go back, test action again, it's going to toggle that. Device is unmuted. Boom, we have done it. We've created a toggle button that mutes and unmutes the MXA 910. We'll hit it again, go back, it's muted. So again, feedback. We haven't added anything, so there's no way of knowing necessarily which state it is. You can see the button does do a little bit of a yellow outline depending on what state it is. Yellow is the latch state, and when it's black, it's the unlatched state. You could use that as feedback as to what the button is, but not helpful. So let's build in feedback to know what state the button is in. We do that by, at least there's a few ways we can do this, but the way I find most helpful and most obvious is to change the background color of the button, depending on what state it's in. So we do that by adding an action to the stacks here, latch and unlatch. So we'll start with the latch action. We're going to add an action. Now it's already here in the recently used, but in case it's not there, or again, if you have a long list, you simply just type in what you're looking to do. In this case, color, and we're going to choose button background color. So for this, device audio mute on. So we are going to mute, when we mute the device, we want this to correspond with a color change of red, right? That's most obvious with a mute. So we change the background color. We'll just drag this to the upper right to get that red color. And then here, these two things correspond to the button that it is actually going to affect. By default, it's going to affect the button that you have selected. There are reasons, which we will see maybe in a little bit, why you would want this to be a different button. But for now, we want to leave this as default to this page, this bank, meaning it will change the background color of this button. Now, okay, so we have the background changing to red when we mute. And then on the unlatch option, again, we're going to add an action of that color change. So type in color, or if it's in the recents, just select that, change background color. And in this case, again, by default, it's going to be a black, but let's have parity with the MXA 910. Well, by default, an MXA 910, when it's unmuted, it's going to be green. So let's just choose one of these greens here. Green. Again, this bank, this page, this bank is going to map it to that button. So now, when we test this button, we mute, boom, you can see the button is red, showing that it's muted. And then when we hit it again, boom, green, unmuted. So again, if we go back to the MXA 910, we see it's unmuted, we mute, muted. All right, there we go. We have a latched button that flip-flops between mute and unmute and shows the status by changing the background color. So now all we have left to do is to map this button back over to our hardware. So again, we go back to the Streamdeck software and simply just choose one of the button slots you want. Let's go upper left. And now again, we drag the companion button over and map that button to the one that we want. So again, if we can't remember, we go back to the companion. This is button 1.3. So we go back to the Streamdeck and say button 1, button 3, dynamic. We want to hard map it to page 1. Boom, there we go. So now we have, pardon the light change there. It's actually my Mac is providing my key light, so went to sleep. So now we have that button mapped to our hardware. So you can't see either my 910 or my hardware, but well, actually I could show you here. I press it. Oh, let's see it. No, too much. But trust me, it's changing color and changing states on the MXA 910. So if you do this with hardware you have, hopefully you're seeing that. So there we go. We essentially have the concept down of doing a latch button and changing what I call faux feedback to let you know what state the button is in. And there we go. Now we could do another form of feedback. Let's do that. We can actually change the text of the button, similar to how we have the background color to reflect the state that it's in. So to do that, we would add an action. We would just type in text, scroll down a bit, and then we select button text. That will change. So when we press this button, we're doing the latch state, which again is mute. So in this case, we want it to say mute. And then on the unlatched state, we're going to add an action. Again, type in text, internal button text, and we're going to say unmute. So now when we latch the buttons, it will change the text as well to give further indication as to what's happening. Pretty cool. Now, obviously, as you can note, 18-point text is a little bit too big for it to all fit, so we can jump that down to 14, and then that will all fit there. So these are the kinds of things you need to do to pretty things up. And then if you're completely OCD, then you got to go back to this one and make it the same size if you want everything all this. You can see how this kind of starts to add up, but that gets into the real minutia of making a clean interface and the kinds of things that programmers get into the weeds on. So yeah, we've created feedback both in color and in text, two different ways to kind of skin the cat, so to speak. But I usually do just the background color, because the next thing I'll talk about is getting icons as your background. Okay, so let's stop here, and when we come back, I'll chat about images on buttons. Okay, cool. All right, so we've made some latch buttons. We've turned the mute on and off. Obviously, like I said, the sky's the limit as to what you can do with that. You can turn individual channels on and off on a device, whether it be P300 channels, IntelliMix room channels. Yeah, so hopefully that concept gets across and you can start building all sorts of cool stuff, and you can start stacking stuff. We'll talk about that maybe in just a bit. But like I said, one of the cool things about the Streamdeck is the fact that you have these programmable buttons that you can have look the other way, look however you want. So to really polish things off, I love adding iconography to my buttons. So let's chat about how to add images to your buttons. Okay, let's jump back over to the software, and we'll get back into the button that we created here, this. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to blow this out, the button text out, and I'm going to delete out those commands. So that's a thing here. If you've added stuff, you need to take them away. You're done with them. You realize I don't want to control it. You simply just delete out any of the commands by hitting the trash icon, and it says, are you sure? So let's delete out the button text off this unmute mute. So now, again, all we have is the color showing the state of the button, but that's not really super interesting. I don't know what this is actually doing. So let's add an icon. And before we do that, just a thing here, you might see this. It may be the case, especially if you have multiple commands, that you need to put commands in a certain order so that one fires first and then the next and the next. So you simply just do that by dragging these commands up by these double arrows next to the delay icon. So also it might be the case that you need to enter a delay so that you set a command, wait, send another command. Honestly, I've found I haven't had to mess with that, but it might be the case that you need to send that. Again, that gets into the more nitty-gritty of programming and whatnot. So hopefully you won't have to mess with that, but just know if you're creating a ton of stacks of commands, you may need to mess with the buffer delay. Okay, back to the matter at hand. We want to add an icon to the button. So in this case, it's an MXA 910. So let's add an MXA 910 icon. I will say I have linked, again, in my Teams channel, my design channel, on that Streamdeck channel, there is a link to my SharePoint site of my iconography. So head back over there, and that's where you're going to find all the icons that I use for my stuff. I've done it ahead of time, so you don't have to. So if you want more, if you have something you'd like to see, hit me up. Maybe I can add it. I've gotten a lot of them from our UX team, but just know that I've already done the work for you. So how we do that, we can browse for that file. So you may have to just download that whole folder. It's already populated since I've kind of pointed already to the folder that I want. So in this case, we want an MXA 910. So I'll scroll down to where that is, MXA 910 icon. So simply just open that and boom, there it is. A little icon of the MXA 910. So now we can see that we are muting this device. How cool is that? Pretty cool. Anyway, so that's pretty much it. You got, I got a ton of stuff in there. So you can map all sorts of stuff to that button to have whatever device you want, including like channel numbers. So let's say this was channel 1 on a P300. You can go to channel 1 clean. There you go. Channel 1. Mute, unmute. Again, so you could obviously put the button text in there to say channel 1. This is actually just using the actual Shure approved fonts. And so it's got the fit and finish of our Shure design. So when you create like this whole page of stuff, it looks like almost like we've made this little device. And so that's why I've created these actual graphics to overlay on the button, even though you can make text within the button itself. The one downfall with that is you cannot change the button image specifically to the toggle. You can't change that on button press. So you can't do the thing where it's mute and unmute. So if you want the text to change with your button presses, you have to use the native text. And you can't use the Purdy version that I made. So that's just one big downfall of using the imagery, is that it has to stay the same under or over top the button. So that's why I don't usually use text. I just use images. So anyway, keep that in mind. So there you go. That's adding imagery. I will show you, maybe let's create a new button, because I think I mentioned this at the outset, is that you can actually use GIFs. So and yes, it's GIF, because the G stands for graphic, right? It's not graphic, so it's not GIF, it's GIF. All right, so let's open this one. Oh, aha. GIFs aren't supported on the companion, so they have to be on the Streamdeck. Okay, so let's add a companion button here. This is good. So let's talk about this. You can add an image, again, because the companion is sitting on top of the Streamdeck. You can add an image to the Streamdeck button that is mapped to the companion button, but it overrides the companion button. So if you have feedback, it will no longer work. So let's do that. Here's this channel 1 button that we made. If I go in the Streamdeck software, here's where I can choose the image for this. So set from file. Let's do that. That GIF I was trying to, because this is where I can run into this whole thing. So you can only have GIFs on the Stream Deck side. That's the only thing that supports it. So now you can see that GIF is now, it overwrote the image. So now I no longer have the feedback as to what's happening, but it is certainly still muting and unmuting the MXA910, as you can see here, as I press the button on and off. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind too. That'll maybe drive you batty, is if you change the image on the Stream Deck, it will override the button you have in the companion button mapped to it. So as you saw, I simply just hit reset to default, and now our Stream Deck button is back, and we have that faux feedback again. You can see it muting and muting under there. So there are reasons why you want to do just the image on this, which maybe we'll talk about. So I mentioned, why do we want to set up the Stream Deck for using companion and Stream Deck buttons? Because one of the biggest ones is folders. Because as you start to get pages and pages of stuff, it starts getting nightmare of how to manage it. So what you do is you can create a folder. So let's do that. So let's go into Stream Deck and we'll create a folder. And we'll name this MXA910. We can format the button text here in the Stream Deck by clicking the little T. We can make the font smaller so it fits in. It's super tiny, but at least looks like it fits in the folder. We can change the button text color. Let's make it white. White. Okay. So now what we can do is we can nest buttons into the folder simply by dragging them, and then it'll kind of open up that folder, and now this button is in the folder. So if I double click back up, it goes back up, and now we have that button disappeared, but now it's nested in this folder. So if we press the folder button, now it will have all the buttons within that folder. So think you could have the MXA910 folder, the P300 folder, so on and so forth. So that is a great way to kind of manage your workflow and to keep things organized. You may have more buttons than, or more commands you need than buttons. So that's where you can start nesting folders and folders and folders. And again, you can kind of get super deep. But again, this is one of the beauties of using the Stream Deck and companion software along side by side. So we can create folders and kind of start organizing our workflow in that. So hopefully that isn't too mumble jumble together and you've tracked along. Yeah, so that is images and working with Stream Deck with folders and kind of mapping buttons all together. So let's stop here. And then the next thing we're going to talk about is making latch buttons, radio style. Alrighty, hopefully you're still with me. Hopefully this is all making sense. If not, hit me up. Maybe we could chat through what's holding you up, or maybe dig a little deeper into what you're finding. Otherwise, hit me up on Teams. I'll try to keep an eye on that. And if I see enough requests of, hey, I'm not understanding this thing, I'll maybe make an appendix video and maybe talk through what I jumbled through. So anyway, hopefully it's making sense, but let's continue on. So let's make a button, or a set of buttons for that matter, that kind of toggle different states. So obviously we have mute or unmute, but what happens if we have kind of 3 or more states that we want, but we also kind of want to show feedback as to what we're doing. So we could do something simple as like presets. So we could show, have a bunch of buttons that show presets, 1 through 4, and then we need to show which one we're actually selected on. Again, we're not going to get true feedback, but at least we can show what button press we're on, and again, by that, what preset we're on. So yeah, let's do that. Presets. So yeah, let's jump back into the software, and we'll create a new button here. and we will we'll make this a button press. So we're going to do a recall preset. So obviously all we need to do is send the preset recall. We don't need to toggle between something. So again, this is just going to be a simple button press. So again, with the 910, we'll use, we'll type in MXA 910, hit send command, and then again, we could do the lookup, but I know it's just simply set preset 1. Okay, and we'll do that. Yeah, so now we've got the simple thing. Now, let's kind of fly this all together. So let's add an image. So in my files, I've made presets. I've just made them round numbers. So we'll see here. Preset. I think, yeah. So it's these number circle, number 1 circle. There we go. So that will correspond to preset 1. All right. So this is where we kind of have to think logically about what's happening. So what happens is when we press this button, it's going to fire off preset 1. And so then we want maybe the background image to change color to let us know that we have selected this preset to be live. So let's think about color. So let's make it like a blue color to show that it's selected. Okay. So again, we're going to go color, button background color, and we'll make it, let's make it like this kind of lighter blue. Okay. Now, here is where the magic is going to happen. This is where we got to be a little forward thinking. So let's say we want to do 4 presets, and this is going to kind of tie concepts all together. So instead of having to recreate the wheel, we're going to do everything all here in the one button, copy it, and then all we have to do is change stuff to kind of map it all through. So again, thinking ahead, we're just going to do 4 presets. So we've got these 4, let's just do these 4 here to map them all to. So when we eventually create presets 2, 3, 4, we need to show that those are selected, but we also need to change the state of this button when the other buttons are selected so that we can tell which button is selected. Hopefully that all makes sense, but you'll see it when we actually do it. So yeah, so basically what we need to do is we need to add 3 more color changes, and we're going to do button background color, and we're going to leave it black so that it shows as deselected. So this is where this comes in handy. So we're going to say this page, but we're going to change that to this button, 1/6. So what this is going to do is when this button is pressed, it's going to change this button to black. Now it's already black, but just think when we map this button to change, when we press it, it's going to go blue. And so then when we press this button back, it's going to set it to black. Hopefully that makes sense. So what we need to do is kind of copy this 3 times so that when this button is pressed, it's going to make all 3 of these buttons black. Again, this is, unfortunately, it's a roundabout way of, again, creating this faux feedback, but this is why you kind of have to think about the logic behind it. So again, we can just simply do this. We're going to do 7 and 8. So now we have 5, 6, 7, and 8. So this is now going to, when this button is pressed, it's going to change it blue and change all the rest of these black. Again, this may not make sense now, but let's watch it, what happens when we map or copy this button to here. Now, for the sake of not messing with my 910, because I'm not sure exactly how well I've done a good job of saving, I'm going to put in a garbled, actually, no, I'm going to do this to let you know a programmer secret. Commenting things out. do a //. That's a symbol for commenting it out. So in essence, what this is doing is since it's a garbled command, it's essentially going to do nothing. But, and I'm only doing this because I don't want to actually send it, but I want to show you what happens when we press the buttons. All right. So we've created this button. Now we're going to do that concept of copying. And this is where doing all the work ahead of time is going to save us a ton of work. So we hit copy. Again, the button we're going to copy and then where we want to move it to. So here. So now we've got 1 and 1, but except we want this to be 2. So let's go back. And we go back into our list. And where's our channel? Number 2. There we go. So now it's 2, except we have to set this, even though it's commented out, we have to change this preset to fire off preset 2. Okay? Now, this is where, again, our copy paste and logic needs to follow what's happening. So in this case, since we've done it ahead of time, all we have to do is change the number. So in this case, we leave this alone because this is going to change this button to blue, but we need to change, but it's also going to change it to black. So it's going to be super confused. So we need to change this to 5 because we want this button to change to black because it was previously blue upon button press. Again, it may not make sense, but we'll show you once the buttons are all done. And then we can leave these the same because these are still mapped to buttons we haven't mapped yet. So now let's copy this. Copy, paste. We're going to browse and change this to number 3. Change this to preset 3. This is mapped to this button, and this is 5, and this is 7. That's not what we want because it'll confuse it. So we just change this one to the one prior. Okay, because we're leapfrogging, going back and back. Hopefully this is all making sense. Rewind this a bunch if it's not making sense, but once you build it, again, it should start to click. All right, so one last time, copy this button here. Choose the button. This is important too. Remember I said you're going to get confused all the time. Make sure you have the button selected that you want to do. You will accidentally be on the wrong button, especially after copying things. It sometimes doesn't, it stays to the button you originally copied. That's where you get in a ton of trouble. All right, so this button is selected, browse. I'm going to change that to the 4 icon. And again, change that to preset 4. And then this number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 is not what we want. We want to go 1 back. Okay, so we are done. We've done it. We've created this toggle, and now it's going to toggle between presets 1 through 4, and now we'll be able to see exactly which one we're on. But before we do that, let's go ahead and map them to our Streamdeck buttons. Again, let's do this. So another trick here, we can also copy here so that we can easily just start where we left off. So copy this, paste here, so we are on the right thing. Page 1, button 6. Nope, we want button 5. Copy this, paste, button 6, paste, button 7, button 8. Okay, now let's put it all together, see how this works. So now if I press button 1, boom, it's going to change the background to show us that preset 1 is active. If I hit 2, it's going to go to 2, 3, 4. Okay, see how that's working? So essentially, you have to do this because it doesn't know what button is pressed. So you basically have to clear out all of the backgrounds when you press the active preset. Again, hopefully that makes sense. Rewind if it doesn't make sense, but that's how you create. And again, it's a workaround for doing feedback. So some of the modules that are written, like you have different scenes, it actually does that logic for you, the tally. for you. But in this case, we just kind of have to manually do it. So again, kind of the sky's the limit on what you want to do. I use this for NLP on my AEC, so I can toggle between low, medium, and high, or the AI denoiser, so you can choose between that. And so you have the feedback letting you know where it is, what it's set to. All right, cool. So hopefully that's shown you really how to get this up and going. So that's really a lot, that's about 70% there. From there, it's just, again, kind of figuring out what you want to do, kind of logically thinking through it, what things you need to kind of do to force things to do one thing and another thing to do a different thing. You can stack commands on top of each other and have almost like a macro button. Again, sky's the limit on that. So hopefully this has been enough of a primer to get you up and going, and you can start playing around with it. Again, avail yourself to Google and the YouTube to figure out, maybe more in-depth concepts about how this all works. But again, super powerful tool, and I think it's going to be something that a lot of people are going to find useful. So again, if you find any troubles or need any help, hit me up on Teams and we'll take it from there. So thanks for trudging through this with me. Again, sorry if it's been a little kludgy or discombobulated, but hopefully you've gotten enough concepts to get you up and running. So ciao for now. See you in the next one.